All right. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I am Jill Briggs Campbell, the Director of Operations for the Agency of Education, and I am joined by Courtney O'Brien, who is our Operations Manager. And we are part of a small but mighty new operations team at the Agency of Education. And so one of our sort of immediate tasks has been the supporting the implementation of Act 29. And so I really appreciate that you all are joining us today. This is one of those pieces of legislation that moved really quickly there at the end of the legislature, and we were all kind of starting to work on it. And then the July flood arrived and sort of derailed us a little bit, but now we're all getting our feet back under us and moving forward. So we appreciate having you all here to make sure that all of our independent schools are aware of the elements of Act 29. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing screen in a second. We have a slide deck. We are recording this webinar, and as soon as it gets closed caption, we'll post it up on our soon-to-be Act 29 website. There's also, we'll also send out the slide deck that I'm using, and there's links that are in the slide deck that Courtney will be posting as we go. I think it would probably be useful for me to just run through the whole slide deck and throw a lot of information at you, but it's going to give you the overview of everything that's in Act 29, and that we can hold time for questions and conversation at the end, because there is a lot of new work here, and then there's a lot of work that you already do, but it's now been sort of codified in statute. So we'll leave plenty of time, I think, for questions at the end. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and share my screen in a very graceful and professional way. All right. And so this also means I can't see you. So if for any reason you have a question, please pop it in the chat, or raise your hand, or unmute and say, hey, Jill, we can't see the screen, or we have a question, or whatever it may be. And Courtney will also help me out with that. Court, can you see my slide deck?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so we're going to be talking about Act 29. And specifically, what are the responsibilities for our independent schools under this new act? A couple of quick things that I want to remind us of before we dive in here, because this act is full of stuff, terms like policies and procedures and guidelines and best practices. And so I wanted to just sort of remind us that there is actually a hierarchy, and that when we're talking about state law, those words have very specific meanings that are not necessarily intuitive to how we use them in everyday life, right? Usually, if we're talking about a policy or a procedure, we're pretty much meaning the same thing. But when we're talking about statute and and then the implementation and work that comes after that, we have specific meanings here, and there is a hierarchy. So the first top line hierarchy is statute, state law. So for example, Act 29 or Title 16. And that's kind of the highest authority for this. You will also see, as we proceed through the slide deck, that there's going to be a lot of references to policies. Policies have a specific meaning in this context, and policies are passed by your school boards and must be voted on and enacted by your school boards. So they are not, a sort of piece of paper that y'all draft and it's something that y'all work from. It's a very specific thing, and it must be done by your school board. You'll see reference in the slide deck and in Act 29 that some of these model policies are things that you are meant to draft yourself, or these policies that you're passing, and some of them will be based on model policies that the Agency of Education is required to develop. And the language will be something along the lines of, the school board will pass a policy that at minimum meets the requirements in the model policy developed by AOE. So whenever you see that AOE has a model policy, you must meet sort of the minimum basics of that. I will also just signal here the other, so AOE, Agency of Education, but VSSC is our Vermont School Safety Center. So if you see that acronym, just know that's who that refers to. And the Vermont School Safety Center is sort of a joint venture a bit that exists between the Department of Public Safety and the Agency of Education. It has 2 full-time staff members. One is Sunny Erickson and the other is Rob Evans. They're both amazing partners. And so while sort of the ultimate authority for and requirement and responsibility in Act 29 sits with AOE, we work really closely with our partners at VSSC and other state entities when drafting model policies or guidance or procedures. So state law, top line, policies are second. Then there's procedures. And procedures can be adopted by school boards or the schools can develop them. And we're sort of going, another way to think about the hierarchy is we're going from most general language to most specific language. So the state law is sort of telling you at a very general level, this is what you must do. The policy is a next level down of specificity, but still pretty general language. You know, the school shall complete options-based response to violent intruder drills twice a year, right? Very kind of general statement. Procedures is sort of the next level down, and it's going to be documents that they do not have to have like sort of this big formal approval by school boards, but they'll be created by school boards or schools themselves. They might be based on model policies or procedures developed by the AOE or VSSC. And it's more that level of you will do this, you know, 6 times a year or 2 times a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. This is what it will look like. This is how you will, you know, report it, et cetera, et cetera. And then sort of down at the bottom is really kind of the how do we do this thing, right? Great, we have to create this new team. What does that look like? And this is what guidelines, guidance documents, and best practices are. And guidelines are usually more formal than best practices, if we want to get really into the minutia here. And this is really about, again, like how do we go about actually doing this? What does an emergency operations plan actually look like? And these are really, I think of them as the tools that will help you to actually do the work that is outlined in your policies. So that's our hierarchy. All right, let's dive in here. So Act 29, which was passed in the last legislative session, and it was pretty highly debated in and discussed in our Senate and House Ed committees. There was a lot of attention on this, a lot of testimony, and it really has codified into law a lot of work that probably a lot of you already do and has also added some new elements. And again, Act 29 is an act to address school safety and security. That's kind of its ultimate thing. It does this by looking at sort of 4 different pieces of work. Those are options-based response to violent intruder and fire drills, all hazards emergency operations plans, excuse me, access control and visitor management policies, the creation and implementation of behavior threat assessment teams, and then also created a work group on student protections from harassment and discrimination in schools. And we're not going to be talking about that today. That's a work group that exists very separate from the implementation of the rest of Act 29. The earliest timelines for implementation actually began in July 1, 2023. As I signaled before, we got a little bit derailed by the July 23 and August flooding and extreme weather events. But we have built into things like the assurances a way to say, you know, we are in the process of doing this work that's required. So we've been really cognizant of the fact that the legislative timelines did not line up with, say, when schools were open or say your school boards were available to pass policies or even draft them. So let's dive in here. So section 1 is emergency drills. And each of these sections sort of had like a larger description for public schools and then a subsection that said basically an independent schools need to do exactly what's above. There's very little difference between the two sections. It's all the same requirements. And I want to be clear that Act 29 applies to approved and recognized independent schools. So all schools that are serving pre-K through 12. So if you are a separate preschool, this doesn't apply to you. But if you operate a kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade, Act 29 applies to you. So each independent school shall adopt a policy. So again, who are we talking about as doing the policy? It's your school boards in a formal setting. So each independent school shall adopt a policy mandating options-based response to violent intruder and fire drills. The policies must require age-appropriate, trauma-informed, and options-based drills. They must follow the guidance issued by the Vermont School Safety Center. And oh my gosh, Courtney, I'm never going to get that right. The Vermont
School Crisis Planning Team.
Thank you very much. And may include additional requirements for fire drills issued by the National Fire Prevention Association, and there's annual requirements around that. The policy must require notification to parents not later than one school day before a scheduled drill. And it requires that the policy should also require that those options-based response to violent intruder drills take place in the fall and spring semesters each year. And they must, and schools must report the completed drills using the AOE drill reporting tool. So hint to you all, again, if we're thinking about policies as being some very sort of basic statements of what the school must do, you can almost take exactly what's here and turn it into your school board policy. You do not need necessarily to dive down into the detail, and I'll show you why in just a moment. And I will sort of signal to you that this is essentially what our public school boards have done, is they basically took the language of Act 29, made a series of statements that has then become the school board policy. So if you haven't already done this, and you need to get your school board together, it doesn't need to be a really, really big thing. And you can create this and some of the other policies in a fairly straightforward manner. So your required actions: establish and pass a drill policy at the school board level. You also need to then conduct drills. So this is the work of the school. Conduct drills in accordance with the guidance issued by the AOE and the Vermont School Safety Center. And we have the link to the updated guidance. So this is how we're going from policy to guidance. How do we actually do this? So the Vermont School Safety Center, Courtney, what is the other? I get this wrong every time. The National Fire Prevention Association has specific,
You got it.
Thank you, specific requirements around what kind of drills you need to do, when you need to do them, and recommendations on how to do them. So what does it mean to be options based? If you read this memo, it gives you a really nice description of what that means. What does it mean to be trauma informed? There's actually lots and lots of resources about what does trauma informed options-based response to violent intruder drills look like. And then there is a strongly recommended schedule for the 2023-2024 drill schedule. And I'm saying strongly recommended this year. In subsequent years, it will be the required schedule, but we recognize again that the timelines here in the legislation don't necessarily line up with the way that kind of the school year rolled out. I would say the kind of critical thing is that you don't wait and do all of your drills at the end of the year. That doesn't make a lot of sense. You wouldn't do it anyways. And as you are completing those drills, we've developed a really basic web form. You're going to go ahead and, you can do this on a quarterly cadence. You can do it on monthly cadence. You can do it as you complete the drill. We ask that you at least report your drills twice a year. So maybe in December and like May or June, with the intention that we're going to be pulling down the information. And if we see that folks are not doing it, then you might get a gentle reminder from our team or from the Vermont School Safety Center team that, you know, you're out of compliance with your required drills. And when did this become effective? Well, August 1st. So this is your drill requirements for Act 29. I'm going to forge ahead here. Section 2. So Section 2 is about emergency operations plans. Each independent school shall adopt and maintain an all hazards emergency operation plan. So this isn't a specific policy passed by the school board. This is a working document. The EOP, Emergency Operations Plan, new acronym, must be reviewed and updated on an annual basis. And it must be at least as comprehensive as the All Hazards Emergency Operations Plan template that's provided by the Vermont School Safety Center. There is one there now on the website. They're making some updates in partnership with the Vermont Emergency Management. And, you know, we've just gone through a major emergency with July flooding. So there's some final updates are being made to it. But if you need to know what this looks like now, you can pop onto the School Safety Center website and take a look at it. It's a very comprehensive plan. And this piece is really important. And I will tell you, Courtney and I were heavily involved in the July flood response and recovery. So we cannot stress this enough. It must be developed and updated in collaboration with local emergency first responders and local emergency management officials. I just cannot emphasize enough how important that is as a best practice. We very much saw that our schools that had those strong relationships already in place, that had practiced their emergency operations, that already knew who they were going to call and who had which roles and responsibilities, were much more operationally flexible and responsive than some of our other schools and districts. So this is really, again, strongly encouraged sort of best practice and a new requirement in Act 29. So again, if we're thinking about the hierarchy, you need to have your emergency operations plan, and it must be at least as comprehensive as the guidance, right? The plan template that's been put up by the Vermont School Safety Center. And again, that's available right now. Some updates are being made this year. So what are you required to do? You are required to coordinate with local emergency responders and local emergency management officials. Introduce yourselves, y'all. It's entirely possible that your local emergency management officials don't know that your school, you know, needs to have an emergency operations plan. They might not even be thinking about, oh, you know, my independent school that's down the road, we also need to have a plan with them. So please, you know, make these connections. We've provided a list of public contact information so you can identify who those folks are within your town. Review the template that already exists on the Vermont School Safety Center. It's not going to have like massive updates and all of a sudden you're doing something totally different. It's just being improved upon. And you need to have this in place by July 1 of 2024. So you've got sort of the whole rest of the year to, maybe you've already got an all hazards emergency operation plan. So maybe you just need to go back and make sure it's as comprehensive as what's on the School Safety Center. Maybe you have never done this at all, in which case, you know, we're going to be providing some opportunities to learn how to develop these kinds of plans throughout the winter and into spring. So you may be starting from scratch, and that's totally okay. So the goal that we're all aiming for is July 1 of 2024. Section 3, just breeze right through that one. Section 3 is an access control and visitor management. This is a lot like your drill section 1. So each independent school shall adopt and maintain a written access control and visitor management policy. So policy, we're talking about school board. And again, if you wanted to really just take these basic elements that are written out in the act and just turn them into a policy, that's in essence what our public schools have already done. I think it's certainly a good way to go because all of your high level statements are right there. So the policy must at minimum require that all school sites lock exterior doors during the day. The policy must require that all visitors sign in at a centralized location prior to gaining full access to the school or office site. And if a school recognizes a need to leave a specific structure unlocked, something like a greenhouse or a tool shed, or other reasonably, for agricultural, recreational, or other reasonably practical purposes directly related to a school's mission or curriculum, it may justify leaving that structure unlocked in its visitor policy. So you just need to include that. So take a look at the physical plant of your school. Do you have a shed? Do you have a greenhouse? Do you have some other outbuilding that really needs to be unlocked because it's not operationally going to work? Otherwise, you need to write up that justification. Excuse me. So your required actions here. You need to establish an access control and visitor management policy that is passed by your school board. You then need to enforce compliance with that policy, right? So it's not just a piece of paper. These are practices that we want to actually be undertaking in the day-to-day operation of our schools. So having the exterior doors to your school building locked, and having a process by which visitors come into your school, and before they have full access to your school, they need to sign in. This is the requirement to enact the. I'm sorry.
I have a question about this one. This is Meg Kenny from Burn Burton Academy.
Hey, Meg.
Has there been any guidance or recommendations for campuses that have multiple buildings, don't have electronic doors or keyless entry already? I mean, that's our biggest thing. We are a campus with multiple academic buildings, and we don't have like a swipe card.
Yeah, so Meg, I can tell you what our partners at the Vermont School Safety Center would want me to say.
Okay.
You know, I think, Meg, there's the reality of the condition of most of our school buildings in our state, and then there's what is the ideal, right? Yeah. So I think that your experience in the scenario that you're describing of like, you don't have, codes or key cards or maybe cameras on the exterior door is not an unusual state. But I think that it's where we are all aiming to go, right?
Okay, that's helpful.
So yeah, I don't think that I can think of very few schools in our state right now that would meet all the requirements or recommendations, right? If we had the school safety center or the team from Homeland Security come through and look at all of our schools, I'm not sure that most of us would meet it. So yeah, it's a totally fair question, Meg. Yeah. All right, I will keep forging on here. Y'all are doing great. Okay. All right, so the policy here, the establishment of the policy, was also one of those ones that went to effect on August 1st of 2023. So I want to again acknowledge that the timelines in statute did not necessarily align with the fact that like your schools were closed, your school boards were not in place. So what we've asked for, and I'll talk briefly about the assurances since some of you got an email today about completing the assurances. When you go into the assurances, and if we have time later, Courtney, maybe we'll actually pull that up. We have some language there that says something along the lines of, we have a policy in place that complies with Act 29, or we will by this date, and then we give you the ability to pick a date, and please don't pick like August of next year, right? So aim for something, coming up here fairly recently so that we can all say that we're making progress towards this. So if you do not already have these policies in place, do not panic. You can still do the assurances, but please identify the date by which you're going to do this, and then you need to move with your school boards. All right, now this is the really meaty section, so please bear with me. The other items, while it's a good bit of work, are fairly straightforward. The Section 4 behavior threat assessment teams is I'm going to acknowledge, a big bucket of work that we are all undertaking in the state of Vermont, and it's going to include trainings, support, guidance. We are not in any way expecting you to know how to create a behavior threat assessment team, to establish trainings or anything like that all on your own. This is work that's going to be supported at the state level for years, right? And this is not a one-off. This isn't you create your team and then you're just done. This is going to be something that happens, needs support and ongoing kind of rigor in terms of its implementation for years to come. I also want to signal to you that this one has some time. So we're looking at July of 2025. If you already have a behavior threat assessment team in place, and I think there's a few independent schools that do, you have some work to do this year. And if that's the case, I would actually ask if you wouldn't mind if you would reach out to myself and Courtney, let us know that you have a behavior threat assessment team so that we can ensure that the supports that are going to be happening this year also get targeted to you. Okay, so a behavior threat assessment team, if you have never heard of it, new acronym, BTAT, is intended to prevent instances of severe and significant targeted violence against schools and school communities. So there's a recognition of the very unfortunate context in which we find ourselves in, and that these behavior threat assessment teams can actually be a really important preventative measure. This is critical. The goal of BTAT is to appropriately, emphasize the word appropriately, assess and respond to potential reported threats. So there are some BTAT trainings that are offered. We've been pushing out some calendar information. They're also posted on the Vermont School Safety Center website, and these give you a really excellent sense of what are BTAT teams for? Why do we have these? How should they function, right? BTAT shall not contribute to increased school exclusion or unnecessary referrals to law enforcement or student discipline systems, and they shall not disproportionately impact students from historically marginalized backgrounds, including students with disabilities. And this is why, again, I think that BTAT 101 training is really excellent because it highlights all of these things. So strongly encourage you to attend. And Court, if you want to, if we have it, the date for the next one, if you want to pop it in the chat, that way people can plan for it. So what are the elements here? There's quite a few, so bear with me. And again, don't feel like you have to swallow all of this right now. We're going to be working on this for the next 2 years. So behavior threat assessment is defined in Act 29 as a fact-based systemic process designed to identify, gather information about, assess, and manage dangerous or violent situations. And I would add as a codex to that, and also to identify when there is not a threat, when there is not a violent or dangerous situation, and to be able to appropriately identify the necessary supports for that student or adult that is experiencing that moment. So it has sort of two sides to it, right? So the requirements here, each independent school shall develop, adopt, and ensure implementation of policy and procedures for use by BTAT teams. So there's going to be policy level school board and there's procedures. But I want to be clear, this is actually work that the Agency of Education is really tasked with, and our partners at the School Safety Center. And then we create the model policies and procedures that you then adopt. So they must be at least as comprehensive. So you do not need to be creating these out of whole cloth. That's actually our job and our responsibility in Act 29. Behavior threat assessment behavior threat assessments shall be structured and used in a way intended to minimize interaction with the criminal justice system. Referral to law enforcement may only be appropriate in some cases. All right, stick with me. So BTAT training, and again, this is work that is really assigned to the Agency of Education, Vermont School Safety Center, and our partners. And then we are tasked with ensuring that your BTAT teams are doing these trainings with fidelity, right? So you are not required to create the training, but you are required to go to the trainings and then to implement your work in accordance with those trainings, right? So each independent school must ensure BTAT training annually. So you're going to establish who your behavior threat assessment team is. And the trainings actually talk a lot about who should be on the behavior threat assessment team. So you don't have to guess, there's information there. And at least annually, you should be attending a training. We're working on something quite a bit more comprehensive than that, that would have sort of levels of training and you know, sort of ability to talk to each other and share your experiences. So more to come on that. As I said, we have 2 years to do this. These trainings, which the state is responsible for, must include best practices of conducting behavior threat assessments and bias training. They must include rules governing exclusionary discipline, the purpose, use, and proper implementation of the manifestation determination review process, which is to do with students with disabilities and on IEPs, civil rights law, I'm not going to read all of that, but including ADA and Section 504, negative consequences of exclusion from school, impact of trauma on brain development, and group bias training. So these are all elements of the training that the state must include. I've lost my cursor. There it is. Okay. The state is also required to create a data collection tool. So again, we have to set the standards for what the data is going to be, and then you must comply with those standards and that data collection. So we've got to do the big work of the framework, then you have to ensure that you're reporting. So each independent school must report data related to completion of and outcomes of all behavior threat assessments and manifestation determination reviews. It should include determinations of no present threat, right? Remember, BTA is intended to identify when there is a real and imminent threat, but also when there is not, and so that you can get different appropriate supports to the student or adult. Specific reporting requirements defined in Act 29, and there's a laundry list that the AOE needs to develop. Total number of assessments completed, student demographic information, time out of school, whether the student was also subject to exclusionary discipline, law enforcement referrals, and the outcome of assessment. And we will be collecting this and analyzing it, and then identifying if our BTA teams are in fact doing their work with rigor and fidelity, or if maybe additional support and training might be needed out in the field, because this is a new undertaking for everyone. So we will be using this data a lot. And so we'll be identifying for you what that data collection looks like in a while. So required actions. Independent schools need to develop or update the BTAT policy and procedures by school year 24-25. To be clear, it's AOE that needs to do it, and then you need to pass a policy and procedures that meet the minimum requirements. Establish your BTA teams by July 1, 2025. Develop and implement annual BTAT training. State does it, you take it. Complete data collection and reporting for BTA activity and outcomes beginning in school year 23-24. That's only if you currently have a BTA team. So there's nothing for you to report if you don't. And provide education to the school community on the purpose and use of BTATs. Again, we will be providing you with communication tools. We will be doing a lot of public communication around this that you can leverage. And so really we're talking about, over a year and a half, 2 years worth of work before we are fully in effect here. As I said, if you actually already have a BTAT in place, please reach out to Courtney and I and let us know, and we can make sure that you are getting all of the resources and supports for this year, and then also that as we develop our data collection, that you will be able to report. All right. I think we're almost done here on my slides. So let's talk about the assurances. I already briefly did. You may have received an email giving you a gentle nudge because these were due October 15th. So we just did a quick look at who hadn't reported, and that's what that email was. So as I said, I think we will have some time here. Yeah, we sure do, where we can actually share the web forms. You can see what's in there, but really it's we already have, or we will have, a drill policy that complies with Act 29 requirements. we already have or will have a egress or ingress and egress. What am I trying to say? You know, a visitor policy. Wow, end of day here, folks. That already aligns with Act 29. We will develop an emergency all hazards emergency operations plan by July of 2024, and we will comply with data reporting requirements. That's what the assurance is. And if you've already got the model policy or you already have your policy, we ask you to upload it. And that's pretty much it. So just briefly, what are the state of Vermont responsibilities? And I've kind of signaled to them as we've gone along, so you don't feel like, oh my gosh, we've got to do all of this ourselves. So the Agency of Education, in consultation with School Safety Center, Department of Public Safety, Office of Racial Equity, we need to publish guidance related to emergency drills best practices. Check, we did that one. That was our updated guidance. We will reissue new guidance memo every year. Develop the model BTAT policy and procedures. We have released that model policy on November 1st. It is currently posted and you can go take a look at it. The public comment period is open through December 1st, and then we are required to actually release the final model policy by December 15th. And that's the one that, not right now, but soon you will be, you know, working towards developing your teams and all of that, and you'll adopt it. But it's not a right now to do, it's a further down the road to do. The AOE and our partners also need to develop technical resources to support BTAT training. Our partners at School Safety Center have as I said, a pretty great BTAT training. I know that because I completed it last week or the week before, and we're also looking at potentially other kinds of trainings to really create like a depth of knowledge and practice for you all. The Vermont School Safety Center maintains and updates the emergency operations plan template. As I said, it's already posted on the website right now, but they're making some updates. And they'll issue guidance on best practices of behavior threat assessment teams, including best practices on reducing incidents of bias. There are materials currently available. So if you want to start thinking about like, what is a BTAT, there's videos, there's guides, there's all kinds of information available on the Vermont School Safety Center under their resource section. So you can really start to dig in. And there you go. Perfect. Courtney, you anticipated my brain there. So there's a lot of links here. We'll be pushing these out so you can take a look at them. But there's really a lot of information already available so that you can start to think about this. And there's lots of trainings that the School Safety Center offers on a regular basis. You can take a look at the calendar. I've attended a lot of these trainings recently and find them to be really valuable. There's also the School Safety Anonymous tip line. That is a really important link and resource that hopefully everybody in your schools knows about. And then there's a whole resource section, like tons of information there. And I will also say, I think the best resource at the Vermont School Safety Center is the people who work there. So the points of contact there are Rob Evans and Sunny Erickson. We've got their emails here. Rob is an awesome resource when schools are dealing with difficult situations. I just can't recommend enough that you reach out to him. Sunny sort of runs all the operations over there at the School Safety Center. And then, of course, you can always reach out to Courtney and I at the Agency of Education. That is all. So now we have, I think, a good chunk of time for questions. If folks want to take a look at the web form assurance page, we can, but it's not that complicated. I pretty much showed you or told you what was on there. But we do have an opportunity for you all to ask some questions. And I hope I did sort of give you a sense of like, what's a now needs to get done, what's a pretty soon we're going to be working on it, and what's a big lift that the whole state's engaged in that we are all going to do together over the next, year and a half or so.
Jill, while we wait for questions, first of all, thank you. Wonderful. This is great information as always. I did want to just clarify the BTA training that the School Safety Center has put on is on pause through the end of the calendar year. So we have not yet scheduled any additional sessions, but we are expecting to be able to do that likely in January. And so we'll take a similar approach. Jill and I will send out a lot of leading communications for you all, likely through the superintendent and independent heads weekly update. You'll see it in the weekly field memo. We'll post it on the website. So if that is something you're interested in, I would say start taking a look closer to the end of the year, and we should have some more info for you.
Great. Thank you, Courtney, for keeping me honest. I had in my head there was one in December, but you're totally right. There's not. All right. And I do see Sunny's on the call. Sunny, I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you want to unmute and pop on camera and introduce yourself? Oh, sorry, Sunny. We'll fix that in the slide deck.
On it right now, folks.
Yeah, no worries. I didn't want folks to get the get the slides and then not be able to actually reach out to me. Yeah, thank you. Unexpected introduction. Hello, everybody.
I saw your
That's
name.
okay. No worries. One second here. I had to unplug my my computer.
And while you were doing that, because I did ambush you, Courtney, can you pop in the link to the drill reporting tool?
I can. It's like I knew we would have a question, and it's right here.
All right.
And
sorry,
folks,
Sunny.
That's okay. No worries. No worries at all. Hi, everybody. I'm Sunny Erickson. I work at Vermont Emergency Management under the umbrella of the Department of Public Safety. I'm the School Safety Programs Manager, lead administrator for the School Safety Center, and we've been working very closely with this team at AOE, the new operations team, and you know, they're a great resource. I really appreciate you putting the School Safety Center information and the name out there for folks to take advantage of all of the resources there. Myself and Rob are available at any time. We're a phone call or email away, and happy to help as we're navigating through all of this, these new requirements under Act 29. And there's a lot in there. It's a lot to digest, but Jill and Courtney and their team are great, and we're here to be supportive as well. So please feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah. And I think what's really helpful as well, Act 29 is, I think, new for a lot of us. It's not new for Sunny and Rob. So
it's true.
Anytime I start feeling overwhelmed, they're like, we've got this. We've been doing this for a while. Like, we're fine. Minor tweaks. So that's great. Thank you, Sunny.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Jessie. I'm from Mansfield Cooperative School, and I don't know how many other people this applies to, but my school is tiny.
I know.
10 students, 1 full-time staff member, and we rent our space from a church who leaves their main doors unlocked during the day because that's part of their mission and policy is to have their building accessible. So I'm really wondering how we're going to be able to comply with a lot of these policies, like even having a behavioral threat assessment team of myself. Like we don't have a lot of, so I'm just, what does that look like?
Jessie, you are not alone. And I actually thought specifically about your school and some of our other really, really small schools in thinking about some of these requirements. Sunny, I hate to throw you on there again, and I don't think Rob was available, but the behavior threat assessment teams do not require that it only be school personnel, correct? I mean, like it could, Jessie, you could have partners from outside the school. What you want is you want to avoid a situation where just one person is making the call, right? The whole idea is that it's a collaborative assessment with different viewpoints. Sunny, is that kind of in line?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely not limited to just personnel. Some schools decide to, bring in local law enforcement, people that might not be, the first that comes to your mind, like bus drivers or crossing guards, coaches. Yeah. It can really be, a very diverse set of, folks on those teams. It's really trying to get the whole picture of the behaviors that might have been, captured by individuals, and then bringing a diverse set of perspectives while they're reviewing these potential threats. So it doesn't just need to be, teachers and administrators. It can be, other interested parties and other stakeholders as well.
And Jessie, in response to your situation with like the physical plant, I get it. Yeah. And I think a lot of independent schools, they do lease their spaces or they share their spaces with other entities. I think that bringing the requirements of Act 29 to that group and sort of talking about how you might be able to develop a policy that could, I think prompting the conversation is a good one, right? And that it might lead to something that isn't necessarily like a totally hardened building, because that doesn't necessarily serve the needs of the church as well. But I think that seeing if you can come to a compromise solution that can, sort of better support some of the safety and security of the kids, like when school is in session. Maybe that's a conversation to prompt. Sunny, do you think that, I don't want to assign him work without him being here. That's what he gets. But that might be something that maybe Rob might be able to support those conversations. And even if we have a bunch of small independent schools, maybe a working group that we could put together for how to help you. You're not alone, Jessie. So we do acknowledge that this is a big lift, especially for our really little schools.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah. Hi, Lisa. I see you there. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Sorry, I missed the first few minutes because I had a hard time getting in.
Oh, no.
And on my side. It's definitely on my side. I'm not great at Teams. Is there consideration of differentiating policy requirements for therapeutic schools? Because with regards to the behavior threat assessment, because I'm thinking that's kind of what we do every day, and so kind of making it into one policy. I have a whole handbook that probably addresses the different pieces. And so I'm just curious about that, of how the DA, affiliated independent therapeutic schools kind of factor in.
Yeah. So Lisa, the needs of the students and sort of the way that you operate in your schools is, and the needs of like that student population is absolutely an area of like concern and needs additional thinking and lots of different folks sort of getting together. We have some time on this is what I want to sort of signal, right? And I think also what I would say is that the requirement of Act 29 says, excuse me, you must have a policy that is at least as comprehensive as the AOE model policy. So you have the ability to sort of go through that model policy and then look at your policies. And if you're like, we're good, there's alignment here. And in fact, we do a lot more as part of our normal operations, you're okay. The law only sort of requires that minimum, but it will allow you to sort of align with what you already do. But yes, that specifically that student population are students that may manifest behaviors on a sort of regular basis. That's something of that's specifically called out in Act 29 as an area of concern. I think there's more to come. I think it's really important that you and schools that serve these student populations are involved in that conversation. And so we've got some time to sort of work those things out.
Jill, if I could mention as well, I will put the link in the chat momentarily. I know you mentioned this in the slides earlier, but the draft model policy, the behavioral threat assessment model policy, is currently open for public comment. So the draft is posted, and we would welcome any of the folks on this call to provide public comment if you have some input there. But I'll put that in the chat. There's a cover memo that goes along, and then the draft policy itself are linked on this page.
Yeah. And Lisa, one more thing I'll sort of say is, again, if we're, because I know I think you missed probably my first slide, which was a hierarchy, right? So if we're talking about where like a policy fits versus state or federal law, so things like, Americans with Disabilities or IDEA and those kinds of things, though any policy should not in any way, or procedure should not in any way contradict or violate federal law. So you probably have better awareness than I do of what those roles and responsibilities are, but that's again going to be sort of a guardrail and a guide for you as you're working your way through it. All right, I see another hand is up. Lisa, did that help?
I said, great, thank you. Yeah, I realized that there wasn't a stress around it, but I just want to make sure that voice was out there, because I know there are multiple of us on the call that our whole team's the behavior threat assessment team on some level.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm sure you also have like manifest determinations that you do frequently. And we've also started talking to our colleagues over in our student supports team, which is IDEA, Students with Special Needs, those kinds of things. So MTSS, so they will also be involved in the conversation as we move forward. So yeah, great point. Thank you. All right, I'm trying to see, Jesse, you've got your hand up. Do you want to unmute?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is Jesse following up with Lisa. I'm from Belcate School, and again, a therapeutic school, and I would, kind of pair it what Lisa was saying around that. That's what we're doing. Where I'm wondering is how much does the language, because we have a number of policies in place to assess for risk as a part of, like Lisa was saying, as a part of our programming, and our own kind of model, if you will, of like how we're doing that and who's involved in that. So I'm just wondering how, from what you guys think, how do we have to like go back through that and align our stuff with this language of behavioral threat assessment and the people that are playing those roles, so that it matches the policy recommendations? Or can we think about what we have and what we're using? And my example is when we had the checklist of things that we had to say, do we have this? I was like marking yes, we do, because we had it. We've worked with the safety center years ago and kind of established what we were going to do. But now I'm thinking like, that's funny that I said that we had that, because you haven't even developed it yet. You know what I mean? So I just want to know, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think so you are likely pretty far down the road in terms of already having a pretty robust process in place. So what I would say is, again, we've got some time here. So particularly around behavior threat assessment, I wouldn't be like hitting the panic button right now. I would encourage you to go take a look at the policy. Again, policy level language is pretty darn high, and probably everything that you're doing is really down into like the real nitty gritty, and just making, I think it would be worthwhile for you at this point to identify if there's a clear mismatch between the model policy and the work that you do. And please provide public comment if there's a clear mismatch, right? This is really important that we, identify if there's like a real red flag that we need to address. But then also, as we are moving forward with this process, we still need to have guidance, best practices, some of which exist, some of which needs to be updated, procedures, and that kind of thing. And I think that you could be a really valuable partner there. I don't think anybody wants you to recreate the wheel in what you're doing.
I don't think the spirit of it is there's going to be much mismatch at all, because it actually came from the safety center to begin with.
Yeah, exactly.
With that, but I think the language is going to be quite different, because you're bringing new language to this, and just like, is there flexibility with how we're communicating that, I guess.
Yeah. I don't think I can answer right now. It might even be the kind of question that probably maybe even needs to go up to general counsel to have her do her look at it. So I wouldn't want to answer on the fly, but if you begin to identify that there's a mismatch or an issue, let us know, and because we're very much in the early stages here. So I think there's an opportunity to to work with you on it. Yeah. And it may be, Jesse, something is, you know, the team that you already have might just need a new name. The new name is Behavior Threat Assessment Team, and then you have some reporting to do. You know, it might be that simple, but it may be more involved. We'll just have to sort of see how it plays out. Good comment, though. Thank you. And Jesse, I'm not being mean. I'm just lowering your hand, just for my own sanity. All right. I'm just checking the chat. And Courtney's put some links in the chat. Yeah, Kyle, you want to unmute? Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Calling from Lehigh, also another therapeutic school. And I had spoken with Rob earlier in the year about the access control stuff. We, again, like many schools, we are also renting in a building, but we're in a public building that is always open. And we also have multiple buildings that our students are moving between all the time. So it doesn't make sense for at least one of those buildings to have any you know, locks to the public on it. But the other side of it is our mission is to have the kids in the community as often as possible to have an open campus in that way. Rob thought because of our mission that it would be fine for us not to have those access controls, so we haven't moved forward with any of that stuff. So I'm just wondering where, A, if that's still accurate, and B, like, where do we file some sort of document to say we've talked to somebody, we've gotten approval, we're in compliance?
Sunny, do you have any thoughts on it? Kyle, I almost kind of want to take it as a sidebar and maybe get an email going. Yeah, so that, because, you know, if we can come to a place that matches the mission, but also if, you know, addresses any potential safety concerns, let's try to see if we can get there. But yeah, let's get Rob back in the loop on it and see if we can come to a resolution. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Jill.
Yeah, good question. And I do want to say, like, none of these policies are intended to preclude the kids being out in the community, right? It's more about that. I think someone described it the other day as like, we want the school to be sort of this really safe learning environment and just ensuring that as much as possible, we know who's in the building, right? And that might vary, might vary here. But again, Kyle, it might be worthwhile to prompt the conversation with your, you know, the owner of the building, right? All right.
Thank you.
All good. It's always like how these things get implemented in the real world is really where it all comes down, right? Other questions? So if I am y'all, and I'm thinking about what are like my immediate next steps that I need to do. So the first would be, if I don't have those first two policies in place, the drill policy and the visitor policy, I need to get those done, right? Again, I need my school board to pass them as policies. I can pretty much use the language in Act 29 as kind of the basis for what I'm going to do and keep it simple. And then I need to complete my assurances web form. So that's step one. Step two would be I need to be doing my drills. So I probably need to go back and review the updated drill guidance memo that went out. So I make sure I've got all of my drills on a schedule. I know what drills I need to do and how I need to do them, and what the best practices are. And then as I'm doing those drills, I need to ensure that I am reporting them. So I need to be making that update. And then I might start to dig in a little bit on some of the resources that are already available around, say, the All Hazards Emergency Operations Plan that already exists on the School Safety Center website. I might do a little bit of research, take a look at the resources. And Sunny, I do think there's some short videos on BTA, if I remember correctly, on the School Safety Center website, start to kind of you know, get my feet under me in terms of what does this look like.
That's correct. Yes, there are.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Sunny. I might also go and take a look at the model policy. And if I identify like, whoa, operationally, this either there's some issue with us or actually this actually already aligns with work that we're doing, I might provide some public feedback before December 1st. And then the other thing that I would really be on the lookout for is really, I would say starting almost in the new year, is as we're starting to push out more trainings, more information, just ensure that you're reading your emails that come into independent school heads and start to avail yourself of those trainings. And as you are starting to have these conversations with your team, and your team may be one, Jesse, I see you at Mansfield Cooperative and some of our other schools. As you are starting to sort of identify like, what are our resource needs? What information are we going to need to be able to do this? Really start to dig into the resources, the trainings, and be in touch with us and say like, hey, you know, we need a group of tiny schools to get together and have conversations with Rob Evans about how the heck we're going to do all this with our tiny schools, you know, or we really, you know, are not understanding this piece of BTA and like how we're going to implement this with our student population or wherever it may be. So I think if we can sort of get through those initial steps right now, what I think of as the immediate steps of Act 29, and then this winter and into spring, let's start to dig in on sort of the trainings, really start thinking about our all hazards emergency operations plan. I have to tell you, the template on the School Safety Center is comprehensive. There is nothing missing from there. And start making those connections with your local first responders and your emergency, your local sort of designated emergency person. Do that before the next ice storm rolls in, you know, and the power goes out. Make sure that folks in your community know that you're there and that you operate, you know, a little tiny independent school, or hey, this big school in your community, by the way, we need to have an emergency operations plan. And also, you know, be in touch with your local school district because they also have the same work. So we might as well learn from each other and borrow each other's homework, is my favorite phrase. So, all right. Are there any other questions before we sign off? I hope this was helpful and not overwhelming, and we're going to take it step by step, and we have time to really, some of the big pieces of this work, we've got some time, and you will be getting a lot of state support to do this. Please reach out and don't be a stranger to us. We're really here. We're dedicated to making sure this implementation gets done in a way that works for you all. So I think that's it. Thank you, Sunny, for being here and letting me call you out on screen.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, and thank you, Courtney. You're amazing. I wish I had that slide deck like a month or 2 months ago. It was very helpful. All right, all. You know where to find us. Thank you. Drive home safe if you're not home already, and we will be in touch.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.